Good afternoon, everyone. It's Nick here from the Youth Trust. I'm the Communications Officer, and for today's podcast, we're talking to Tonia Redvers. So, Tonia, who are you and what do you do?
Well, hi, Nick. I'm Tonia. I'm the Director of PARAGON, Young Lives and the Counselling Services within the Youth Trust. And I kind of oversee all those services. I don't know what I do.
I mean, it's a big job because, we hire something like over 700 people.
Yeah.
And not exactly roughly split down the middle, but Paragon deals with some very heavy stuff that is sort of coming into the public light a lot more these days, what with changes in laws like stalking and coercion, which was back in 2015, becoming an actual punishable offence. What does it take to become a director of something like that? Because you don't just fall into it. Obviously, being a director means that you've been in the role for a while. What made you get into this and not, something like learning disability?
I guess working with families and people, more the families, has always been my passion. Many moons ago, I was a counsellor working as a therapist. I had a private practice.
Oh, so it's a background.
Yes,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so I'm a counsellor by trade and that's my background. So I was working as a private practice, but also I worked with Spotlight. Now, Spotlight was a really innovative and groundbreaking response to people with addiction issues. And when my work there was mainly with people, so I was counselling them one-to-one, I was delivering recovery groups and growth development groups, whatever was needed by the people we worked with. And they ran the project, and it was all run by people with addiction issues, by people in recovery, and it was fantastic. It really was. It was real.
Oh, wow.
And everyone was connected, they had an investment in that, and they really wanted it to succeed. And working with those people was just stunning. We did so much work. And one of the groups...
So where was it based?
That was based in Fareham, but we also worked in Rowner in Gosport.
Okay.
And there was a lot of addiction issues in Rowner, and there was a lot of unrest within the community. So the work we did over there, along with many others, we opened up a small centre over there. And I was working with mums and dads and families, and that led us to doing some work with children. And the mums and dads would say, if only there was something like this available when we were younger that could have helped us, they then started to question whether they would have gone down that path. So bit by bit, I started to do work that I never thought I would, which was with the whole family.
Okay.
And that then changed my journey, if you like, and I started to work in Portsmouth. And I worked in Portsmouth at that time with families and with special education projects. And it was about supporting young people who were marginalised, disaffected from education to ensure they stayed connected somehow, somewhere. But more it was about understanding why were they disadvantaged, why were they marginalised, why were they not going back into school, what was going on with it. So we developed lots of little special projects.
Okay.
And that was over 20 years ago now.
Is that under Spotlight still?
No. So I was doing Spotlight, and then I carried on doing Spotlight, but started to move to work with Portsmouth.
Oh, okay.
So this was a move with that client group, but working in slightly different ways with their children education. And it felt like a very organic and natural move. And as time went on, I left Spotlight. That changed and became something slightly different, and I moved more into the education. I worked full-time with special projects in Portsmouth for Portsmouth City Council, and that was really great. We had lots of different teams looking at how we could support young people, either to educate them in special learning zones or to get them back into education. And I always used to smile, because if I went into school to see any young people, they'd go, "Miss, how do you know my name? That's brilliant. Miss knows me. Look, she knows my name."
That's very cute.
And they would always laugh. And I'd say to them, "It's really not brilliant that I know your name, because I only work with naughty boys and girls." And so we would have a really good laugh. And that's one of the ways we kind of got on and just spoke to them.
Kind of thing.
It did. It just made us really human, wanting to understand who they were. And why education was failing them. And many of those young people had, obviously, their own personal stories. There was some real sadness there, working with one young boy that had been sexually abused and assaulted. And that just started to trigger my understanding and my wanting to learn more about that side of it. So everywhere I worked, it just triggered a desire and a want in me to learn more. So I worked with special education projects for a while, and then we were working particularly with young people on the edge of crime. And at that time, there was a lot of investment into young projects and looking at young people and what more could be done. So the project that I went to work for then was called Preventing Youth Offending Project. Still within Portsmouth City Council, still working with families. And I had a whole team, and what we would do is work with the young people, but also work with the parent. And we did lots of parenting programs, lots of supporting them, getting mums and dads and kids talking, and really when relationships had broken apart, just seeing what we could do to pull people back together. So always my work has been around that family unit and the importance of it. And if we communicated differently and better and stopped and thought about other people, what difference and changes that could make within our own families and within our own lives.
So it's very much a sort of almost like a preemptive approach, as opposed to just fixing something that is, 20 years down the line that someone may have been in and out of jail. You're dealing with younger people and you're trying to sort of give them the skills or bring people together and build bridges that actually sort of prevents them from going down that kind of dark path, I suppose.
Absolutely that. So we work very much with young people who are at risk of, rather than young people that were, which is why it was the Preventing Youth Offending Project. It was a voluntary access project, and we had the youth offending team that worked with the young people once they'd gone through the criminal justice system, and we were this side of it, if you like, trying to help and support them and stop them going down that route if we possibly could. And again, many, many young people that we worked with that were just joyous. So much fun. And these were young people that were articulate, that were great, but something had just bounced on them in life, and it meant that they had gone through a different path. And also being in Portsmouth in the city, that works for some people, but for others it was just too big, too busy, and they got lost in the system, if you like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Portsmouth is a very crowded, sort of high density population. So yes, you say it works for some people. And I mean, that sort of lays the foundation, I would assume, for you then joining or looking for more roles that you can then create the projects, or were you actually creating the projects up until now as well?
Bit of both, really. We were creating projects whenever we could find bits of funding, working with the young people, seeing what they wanted to do. And one of the projects we created, which was probably the segue into my next part of my career, was the Cookie Crew.
The Cookie Crew?
The Cookie Crew.
Okay.
So this was a group of young people who had been affected by domestic violence and abuse. And we used to work with them after school. We'd pick them up from school and we would take them to the project, and they always had cookies and milk. And they named their group the Cookie Crew.
That's very cute. I like that very much.
After the cookies. And it was really great. So what we were doing with these young people was about really introducing them to the concept of risk and safety. So we would take them out and we would help them to cross roads, identifying what was risky about crossing a road, so they could start to understand the concept of risk. And then bit by bit, we would bring it into their own homes, really slowly at their pace.
What sort of age group, sorry to jump in there, what are we looking at?
No, that's fine. We worked with anyone that was at school, so from 5 years upwards.
Oh, really?
So it was in primary school.
Okay.
Once they went to secondary school, they could work with a different team, but we just worked with this young team.
So it really is young lives, because a lot of people think sort of 13 to 18 perhaps,
No,
teenage
this is
years.
young.
This is young.
Young
Okay.
lives. Because what we were doing, if you think about the journey, part of my work had been about supporting young people to stay in school and wondering why they disengaged from education. A lot of those young people came from a domestic abuse household.
Okay.
So if we could then get those young children and hold them earlier, teach them the skills and the resilience that they needed, they might stay linked with education.
That makes sense, yeah.
When you're in a domestic abuse household, one of the things that you might want to do is to stay at home to protect the non-abusing parent and be a guardian.
Like to almost dilute the situation, so it's not just one. Okay,
that if you're there, someone else isn't going to come along, and that abuse, you'll think that abuse isn't going to happen. So we were getting that information. So the Cookie Crew was about us trying to get to those young people earlier. It was funded by a European grant, and it was part of a much bigger project. And so that was part of our innovation, to see what more we could do. All this work led me to my next role, which was the Domestic Abuse Coordinator in Portsmouth.
Is that what Portsmouth Council paying from government? And
Yes.
were you based sort of like Guildhall area?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, based in Guildhall area. So my job really was about partnerships, about building a coordinated approach to domestic violence and abuse, so that all the agencies, all the schools, everyone in the city understood what domestic abuse was, and they could support anybody that came to them. So pretty much like we're trying to do now in Paragon, but I was doing it just within the city of Portsmouth, so it was a smaller area. But we introduced the MARIC into Portsmouth, the Multi-Agency Risk Assessment Conference. We introduced the Special Domestic Violence and Abuse Courts into Portsmouth. So we did loads of really groundbreaking, innovative work. It was very pioneering. It's one of the great things about working with a unitary authority, that you can be pioneering because they can turn things around quickly. And so all the innovative projects that I was involved in at that time were all driven by Portsmouth City Council. And it was brilliant. It was really great. So I stayed with them for quite a while, but I worked in 4 different teams whilst I was there, because I really enjoy that project work. I love the creating and the building and the growing, and then seeing and learning from all of that, and then being able to move on and do something else and implement that learning to do something else.
So when you were working for City Council, what then decided to make you change from that? Because it sounds like you were doing a lot of very important work, creating these new initiatives, as you mentioned. Did something make you decide, hang on, I need more control of this, or I want to do something in a more holistic approach, or what?
I would love to say yes to that, Nick, but sadly, the money ran out. It was as simple as that.
Okay.
The money ran out for lots of work, probably coming along at that time of the first lot of austerity around 2011 time. And the money ran out, so no one could pay my wage anymore, along with many other people. So I was made redundant. And I took that chance, though, just to stop and step back and go, right, where did I come from? Where did I end up? And what did I want to do? And one of the things that came up at that time was working for the Roberts Centre. And that was, again, back working with families, working with children. And I really enjoyed that. And I loved what I got from that work. But it wasn't creative and innovative. We were delivering on someone else's vision. And that's not who I am. And then the role of domestic abuse manager came up with the U Trust, working in Portsmouth, back to Portsmouth, and managing the refuge there. And I was like, I would like that gig, thank you very much. Yes. Sign me up, definitely. And the rest, as they say, is history, sort of. But I have had a brilliant journey through the U Trust, and encompassing all of my loves and desires, working with families. So I was working just doing domestic abuse, but then my role changed to work with families. So that's when I took on the young people, and I was working with the young people and growing that, and I managed the young people supported accommodation in East Street and Fareham. So I had Refuge, I had East Street, and we had the Dorset teams. And so from very early on, my footprint was quite wide over a number of counties and travelling all around the place. And kind of I've got used to that travel now, and I love it. But managing that, the supported accommodation in East Street, was just divine. And we also had Blake's in Gosport. And that was brilliant. Almost back to my love, working face to face with young people. We had a great big team. They were fantastic. And just helping and supporting one of the young people, I'm always mindful. She came into our team, and I'll call her Jenna for want of a name. So Jenna came along to our team, and the police had written her off, housing had written her off, everyone had written her off. She was involved in gang culture, quite significant gang culture, and that need to be all right was really, you had to be strong.
Tough,
really tough was absolutely part of her survival. And so because she was so tough and strong, nobody could get to her. And she was living in one of our less supported accommodation, because it was felt like she didn't need so much. And she came to me one day, she went, "This isn't working for me. Can I come to your high support accommodation and get some real help?" You could have floored me.
Wow.
And it was a wow. It was a wow moment. And we just went, "You want to come?" And she was like, "Yeah." She said, "I know I'm not going to change and get okay if I can't do this real solid work." And we took her. We took her up to East Street. This was not an overnight piece of work. There was a lot of life in that young lady that she wanted to look at and address. And this was somebody that housing said they would never house her, that she was beyond help, that the police, as soon as they looked at her, they would arrest her, they would stop and search her, they would turn her over every single time. And she just let them do it. We did loads of work with their emotional responding because they, without wanting to be contentious, I believe they were provoking her because she had a very short fuse. And if they pushed enough, she would flip and they'd go, there you go.
There we go,
yeah.
exactly, yes.
And so we did a lot of work with her and bringing the police in to say, you've got to appreciate how she's changed and give her space.
I see, okay.
And so the PCSOs came regularly into the house. So we got a great relationship with them. We broke down those barriers. But I've always found that the police in the areas that I'm talking about were very supportive to the work we did. So we worked with Jenna for a couple of years, and Jenna stayed engaged with us. She turned everything around. She was stunning.
Oh, wow.
And walked into Farnborough Council and they said, we would love to house you. And it was a real moment that I get tearful just thinking about it. She wanted to live a different life than the one she was living. And she really had that moment of clarity when she said, actually, it's up to me. If I don't do something, then this is going to be my life. And she didn't want that. I think the sadness is the houses that we used to have, these supported accommodation houses, although they were unregulated, which is another story, and I can talk about that another time, they were the best support for these young people. We had staff there all the time. We helped everybody through whatever they needed. And those things, that's where the government has stripped funds away. I don't want this isn't a political podcast, but money's disappeared out of our communities.
Of course, if the money's not there, then you can't support.
And we can't do it. And if we hadn't been there for her and others, many success stories that we had, I remember sitting in the road, cradling one of the young people who had a personality disorder and wanted to die. So she said, let me just sit in the road and a car will come and hit me. And I said, well, I'm not going to let you do that, am I? So I sat in the road with her and one of my colleagues was just pushing the traffic around us. And she was like, you're not going to leave me alone, are you? And I'm, no, we're not. We are here for you and we don't want you to die. And so when she felt that she could then accompany me, because she said, can I just sit on your lap? And I was like, yeah. So we were in the road and she was sat on my lap and she went, I just want you to hug me. That had been denied that young person. And some people would look and go, you're not supposed to touch. And I go, no, touch. If somebody invites touch, it's very different from you imposing. But she just said, can I sit on your lap? Will you just hold me? Because she wanted, you know, in those therapeutic words, to be contained and held. She was spiralling out of control and she didn't know how to pull herself back in. So the physicality of me wrapping my arms around her enabled her just to pull herself back in. And then she could look up and go, right, should we go back inside now? Which we did, put the kettle on and had a cup of tea. In all good ways.
Oh, wow,
and then we sat and talked it through. There are many stories like that of what my team have done. You know, I'm not just sitting saying I was the only one. They were amazing. But bit by bit, services change, services move. And then we moved on to our young people in Dorset. We've got our Young Lives Thrive in Dorset. I've got the youth counselling teams in Portsmouth, across Hampshire, and Isle of Wight and a few other counties. And of course, we've got the Paragon, which are our domestic violence and abuse teams. All of those names, the youth counselling centres, Star Counselling, Young Lives Thrive, Paragon, have all been developed with the people we work with.
This is something that I know, obviously doing communications and outreach and writing blogs and things like that. One thing that's very clear to me is STAR, for example, which is our sexual trauma and recovery service. You get feedback from people who participate in this. You get feedback from people who go out and retreats and stuff. And do you really take it to heart? Do you really put it back in to what you do?
Yes, yeah, definitely. It's the only way, I couldn't imagine, sorry, I'm stuttering with my words, because I could not imagine working any other way.
I think up till now, at least not maybe not up till now, but it's certainly in the media, when you think of a counselling service, you have to fit, the person has to fit into the structure of the place that you're going. Where you know, Monday you're doing this, Tuesday it's regimented. It's not really a holistic sort of malleable. You know, the counselling doesn't work around the person. The person's going to work around the counselling. If you understand.
Yeah, I do. It's one of my favourite expressions, is saying that we fit into the person, they don't fit into the service.
Yes.
And we also hate the word service, and there's another conversation to have as to how we're trying not to use that word. Agreed. Because we're not a service, we don't do two, we work alongside people and we work with people. they've got just as much information and knowledge about themselves and who they are, and we bring information and knowledge about other things, and together it is very much that the whole is greater than the parts. It was something we started many years ago when I was in Portsmouth Refuge, and we used to say, why is it that women that are capable of running their lives would walk into a refuge, dump all their skill set at the door in the carrier bags, be done to, and then pick it all up on the way out? And we looked at that and went, oh, it's not them, it's us. Because they would walk in and we'd go, right, now you're going to go through forms. Now we're going to do this. Now we're going to give you what food you can eat. Now we're going to do this. Here's this, here's that. And it would be regimented. And so bit by bit, we said, we're not doing that anymore. We're not going to do everything for you. We'll do it with you. And it took some time, both for clients or staff, the people we're working with, to understand and to figure out that we wouldn't do that. So they would come to the office and go, can you phone my doctor and get me an appointment? And we'd go, no, but you can phone your doctor and get an appointment. Here's the phone. And they'd be like, aren't you going to do it for me? And we're like, no, let's do it together. And that enabled people to keep their self-esteem, to keep up that skills, and just to be all of who they are. And we're saying, you know, you're coming in here, but it's not your home. This is a short-term accommodation for you. Let's keep you being the best person you can be whilst we work through all the other stuff. And of course, for some people, they treat it as their home, and quite rightly so. You know, we go to work in their home, but equally, we wanted them to understand that this was a part of a journey for them, and it wasn't the final destination.
And of course, they need to participate in that. Otherwise, you're sitting back and you're being passive.
Yes.
Nothing's really going to change if you're being passive.
It's one of my sayings that my children probably hear quite a lot, of being passive recipients of life.
There you go.
And I really don't like it. And I'm going, you've got to be active and engaged in your life. You can't be a passive recipient, because then you just are a puppet for other people.
Yes, you're just watching a show. You're not actually making anything happen.
And for people, so if we think about domestic abuse, but even with the young people we work with, and probably a lot of clients in counselling, maybe all the people we work with, they've been robbed of choice. They've been robbed of the ability to make a choice because they think they're going to get told off, it's going to be played, they'll be gaslighted, that the choice they make other people won't like. And they're so desperate for it to be okay that they're always constantly looking to other people to either make choices for them because it's safer, or they just don't know how to make a choice. And I know back in the Spotlight days, the first thing we would say to somebody, would you like a cup of tea or coffee? And they would say, I don't mind whatever you're making. And we'd go, that's okay. What would you prefer, a cup of tea or a cup of coffee? What's your preference? And we would maybe do that back and forth, and then they'd go, actually, I think I'd like a coffee. That's your first decision made.
I love that. It's so
with no
innocuous.
consequence.
It's yes, it's not a big thing and whatnot, but it's a seed that allows them to take control.
Yeah, and how many times do people go, whatever you're making? And it's generally, it's about people not wanting to fuss. You know, I'm not fussed, I'll have whatever's coming my way. But it's not about taking responsibility and decision making. So if you can plant that seed where there's no repercussions, it's really small, it's really gentle, then people can build on that and just build that skill and build that ability to say, what do I want? Because the other thing that happens with a lot of people we work with is that they stop believing their inner self. And I might want a cup of coffee, but I don't trust myself to believe that. So I'll just go, you give me whatever you want, because I don't know how to make a decision.
You lose trust in your own decision making.
Yeah, and your own sense of feeling. You know, what am I feeling at the moment? Well, I don't know, because you're told that what you're feeling isn't true.
Oh, okay, I see.
So you stop believing it. You know, we start off innocently. I used to run safeguarding training. And so when a child falls over and bangs their knee and they go, oh, mummy, it hurts, or daddy, it hurts, you go, no, it doesn't, kiss it better, kiss it better. That's really innocent, isn't it? And we do that to kids and go, no, it doesn't hurt, it doesn't hurt.
My brothers when they were younger, so I'm guilty of that too.
But what we're doing is denying their reality, denying their experience.
Oh my God, I'm guilty.
Yeah, we all do it, don't we? We all do it. And when we do it, it's innocent. It's not in a disruptive or an abusive way. We're not doing it to stop people believing their own sense of self. But some of the young people we work with, definitely within our counselling services and absolutely in our domestic abuse services, people have had their sense of self, their knowledge, what they think is happening, knocked out of them. You know, quite literally for some people, but denied, their experiences denied time and time again. So they then start to believe that what they're feeling and thinking is wrong.
So they just literally can't believe or trust themselves to feel, even if they're feeling that, wow, that's I can see what
So
you're
we
saying,
started very innocently, and we do, but it in some of the work that we do, it takes on a much deeper and more meaningful tone. And just saying to somebody, make a decision about a cup of tea or coffee can be huge.
Yeah, that's incredible. I've never even thought of it that way, especially with the whole falling down thing. Now I'm going to reevaluate a lot of things I've done in the past. But you mentioned the Young Lives. Now I believe we just got a contract over in Dorset, or an extension of a contract for Young Lives. What exactly do you do down there?
Well, the team over there, we have got 2 buildings, one in Weymouth and one in Dorchester. It used to be the old foyer, so it's a purpose-built building. That's always too much coming out of your mouth, isn't it? It's purpose-built, and it houses 20 young people. It's got offices for staff, it's got communal lounge, communal kitchen, and a communal education room. So what we do with young people there is we help and support them to gain life skills, to get a sense of self, to get their identity, their self-esteem, to learn how to communicate, understand themselves, and really figure out what they want to do for the rest of their lives. So some young people we'll help to get back into education, we'll get employment or training, so that they're doing something meaningful with their time. The new contract that we've just won is amazing, and it's given us another chance of being creative within that team.
Yes, because it sounds like in your experience, in your life, you have been very creative.
I love it.
I've seen the art that you create. I know you're creative in that regard, but also in the work that you do, you're pretty creative and doing and approaching different things.
When you listen to the people you work with, it just fires off all what how can we do this? What can we do? What do you want? It's almost like they give us the colour palette, and then together we can produce a painting. Mm-hmm. But it's getting those colours. So what is it that they want? How do they want this to be? And so what we're looking at doing is much more mentoring. So people coming in, they've got lots of skills and life experiences. They can come in and mentor the young people, and maybe offer them work experience or even gardening, just something, that whole health and well-being. So we're looking at a whole big mentorship. We are looking to recreate the learning environment. So some young people will be educated from that building. So we'll have tutors and we'll have people coming in to carry out the work there. So if they're not in another education establishment, we will be doing that there. We've got the communal kitchen where they learn cooking skills, where they learn how to look after themselves, really. And in some ways, what we do is love, careful, if it's not too twee to say, because I know we do. Sometimes we're the only people that do care. But also, what Michaela, the manager there, will say is that they put in boundaries. And sometimes for the first time, young people realise there's consequences to their behaviours. Generally, we get on really well with parents, so it's a myth to think that all parents don't like their children. That's not true. So some of the young people that live with us have great relationships with their parents. They just aren't able to live in the same house, or there's not enough space, or something's happened in life. So what we work with as well as the parent and get them on side, and we talk with the parent about putting boundaries in place and the consequences, because when parents have only ever wanted to do what they think is right by their child, sometimes they might not have the strongest boundary. They'll allow it to be bashed up against a bit. So the work that the team do there is really supporting the parent to keep that boundary and to make it more significant and have consequences. So if we don't have parental support, it can fall apart easier than if we do have parent support. So there's lots of work that goes on with families. One of the things that's really exciting for us, and it could be scary, but let's go with exciting, is that there is a requirement. So we look after young people who are aged between 16 and 17, so there's a requirement to become regulated with Ofsted. So very similar to our supported accommodation and our learning disabilities teams that are regulated with CQC, the Quality Care Commission, Our Young Lives Dorset will be regulated with Ofsted.
And what is Ofsted for people outside of the
So
industry?
Ofsted is the education. So they oversee the education provision, and they make sure, there's been a lot about them in the news recently,
Yes, that's
hasn't there?
yes, exactly.
So they go into education establishments and they make sure that you've got certain standards. So what they've done here with supported accommodation, they've spent the last year or two, probably longer, but what we know is the last few years, looking at those regulations, putting them into place. So we were part of a group that came together and fed into those regulations what we would like to see. We were asked, there was a lot of discussions. So we put our feedback around a number of questions about what we'd like to see, how they should be regulated, and what those standards should look like. So that's all starting to come out now. We've got some guidance, we've got some booklets, and the actual regulation portal opens up at the end of April.
Okay.
So we have got till nearer the end of this year to be regulated. And if you're not, you're out.
Oh,
you're
wow,
done.
really?
Yeah. It's going to be quite tight. So Michaela and I, but led by Michaela, bless her, are now doing the regulations, the standards, and we're working through everything that we need. So it's going to be a real big piece of work because it's the first time we'll be regulated, but we are excited.
It is very exciting.
It is exciting.
Scary, but also very exciting.
Yeah, it is. There's lots of standards around all the other work that I do. The young people, we set our own standards, and obviously we had contract standards that we needed to do, but we know that what we offer is really great, and it is. That team in Dorset are stunning. The work they do is amazing, and it's really good now that that's going to be regulated and people will understand that we're not like the fly-by-night unregulated accommodation that hits the news.
Which has been hitting the news indeed.
It has.
I think even in Portsmouth there was a incident that took place a couple of months ago. So, and of course these places are unregulated, so you could have anybody running them with no stamp, as it were.
And anyone living there as well. Because where we're part of a housing panel, anyone that wants to come into the accommodation is reviewed, assessed, talked with, know what they're coming into, knows the expectations. So there's a real discussion before somebody comes in, and you want to make sure that that will work with everyone else living in the house. Because it is their home. They can be with us for a few years. So we need to make sure that works for everybody.
Well, I mean, the recognition is fantastic, surely.
It is. It's a really good... I think not only being re-awarded the contract, but now going through that regulation, I think that recognition for the team in Dorset is brilliant. It's stunning.
It's wonderful being brought in as stakeholders so you can actually feed back and feed into regulations that are being sort of written and formed as you go.
Yeah.
So we'll come back in a year's time and see exactly how that's done.
Oh, we will. Next time, we'll pick that up next time, without a doubt. Yeah.
Absolutely. Thank you very much for your time.
Not a problem. Thank you very much, Nick.